Hello everyone, welcome to this video presentation. My name is Yasin Hari and I will be presenting alongside my colleagues Hajar Orqiya and Khadija Boukzine. Today's presentation is about two teaching methods. The first one is grammar translation method and the second one is the direct method. This presentation will try to answer the following questions. What makes the direct method different from grammar translation method? How grammar is taught in both methods? How does the teacher respond to students' errors? What are the teaching goals of both methods? How teacher rules differ in both methods. Now, let's go to see how grammar translation method deals with teaching second languages. As the name implies, grammar translation method deals mainly with translating texts from the target language to the first language of the learners. This method was mainly developed to translate ancient texts like the Bible and ancient Greek texts. In this method, students are supposed to translate and memorize grammar rules. It was believed that this process will enhance their general intellectual capacities. Grammar translation method is all about accuracy of the written language, the correct grammar, and of course, translation. Learners learn individual grammar points in a deductive and organized way. For example, the teacher gives the rule and the students are supposed to memorize the rule and use it in selective and organized examples. For grammar translation method, written language is regarded to be superior to spoken one, and for that, the accuracy of the written language and the mastery of grammar rules are very prioritized. The method also works on breaking and analyzing the structure of the language in terms of words, phrases, and sentences. The first language of the learners is used mainly in classroom instructions. Culture is viewed as only consisting of literature and fine arts. It's not taken in consideration while teaching or translating. The mastery of grammar and vocabulary is very important according to this method, since its whole purpose is to translate Latin and Greek texts. This method has its own strengths and weaknesses. Let's hear them with Khadija Boukzine.
Hello everyone, my name is Khadija Boukzine and I'm going to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of this method. So the strengths can be listed as follows. This method helps learners master the grammatical rules through the detailed analysis of grammar rules followed by application of these rules to the task of translating sentences and text. It can help learners be familiar with the literature of the target language, and it can be used in situations where understanding literature text is the primary focus of foreign language study and where there's little need for speaking knowledge of the language. It can be effective for teaching translation. It emphasizes written language so that learners can improve their writing skills. And it can be applied to large classes. That's to say, it can be used in classes with large number of students. Despite these advantages, this method was perceived to have several drawbacks, and one of them is that the language is taught in isolation from the context and the culture. The teacher's rule is traditional, so the teacher is the authority in the classroom. Students are passive learners since they lack an active role in the classroom. This method relies heavily on memorization, so students were required to memorize endless lists of vocabulary and grammar rules, and it was less communicative because much of the lesson was devoted to translating sentences into and out of the target language. There was a mechanical practice of the language rules, which involves activities aimed at forming accuracy rather than fluency. It adopted the belief that literary language is more important than spoken language, so little attention is paid to speaking, listening, and pronunciation. And the last point is that the teacher corrects all students' errors. So when students make a mistake or when they don't know the answer, the teacher supplies them with the correct answer without giving them the chance to think about their mistakes.
Hi everybody, I am Hajar Urqiya and in this slide we are going to see together the teacher's rule of grammar translation method. The first one, the teacher is the strict authority in the classroom. He is the traditional instructor. He is the only source of knowledge. He explains, translates and conducts practices and, teaches grammar starting from the basics. Now let's move to students' role. Students are passive receivers of the new information. They are supposed to memorize tedious grammar rules and vocabulary. They are the doers of what the teacher says, and they practice by translation. Let's now move to classroom application. The first one is translation of texts, mechanical practice of grammatical rules, memorization of vocabulary, and then composition. Here are some examples of classroom applications. The first one, grammar rules are emphasized at the beginning. For example, many teachers or Moroccan teachers apply this method for teaching baccalaureate students. Teachers use students' native language to explain abstract nouns and give instructions. And finally, students translate some words from the target language to their native language or vice versa. This is an example of grammar translation method task.
As a response to the perceived inability of grammar translation method to teach learners how to use the target language communicatively, the direct method emerged. The direct method was an answer to the dissatisfaction with the older grammar translation method, which teaches students grammar and vocabulary through direct translations and thus focuses on the written language. There was an attempt to set up conditions that imitate the mother tongue acquisition, which is why the beginnings of these attempts were called the natural method. In other words, it was an attempt to teach the second language in the same way as one acquires his or her mother tongue. One of the basic rules of the direct method is that no translation is allowed. In fact, the direct method receives its name from the fact that meaning is to be conveyed directly in the target language through the use of demonstration and visual aids, with no resource to the student's native language. This method emphasizes that classroom instruction are conducted exclusively in the target language. Only everyday vocabulary and sentences are taught during the initial phase, while grammar, reading and writing are introduced in the intermediate phase. All communication skills are built up in a carefully graded progression organized around question and answer exchanges between teachers and students. So learners need to learn how to ask questions as well as answer them. As opposed to the grammar translation method, grammar is taught inductively by giving students examples to study and figure out the rules for themselves. Concrete vocabulary is taught through demonstration and realia. So for students to associate the meaning to the target language, the teachers are required to demonstrate meanings, not to explain or translate. Abstract vocabulary is taught by association of ideas. Both speech and listening comprehension is taught. The syllabus is based on situations or topics, so using the language in a realistic everyday situation enables learners to be actively involved in the learning process. Apart from this method insists that learning a language also involves learning how speakers of that language live. For this, students need to study culture consisting the native speaker's history, geography, and information about their daily lives.
In this following slide, we are going to see together the benefits of the direct method. The direct method provides better understanding through using realia and audiovisual aids. Fluency and good pronunciation are mainly developed from the very beginning. It sets a good environment of learning. It prepares students to use the target language of everyday life by speaking different situations. Culture is viewed as the history of the native speakers of the language and the geography of the country. And finally, students are more active participants in their learning. In this following slide, we are going to see the weaknesses of the direct method. The direct method is effective only with auditory and visual learners. It overemphasizes listening and reading skills. It is not very effective in early stages of learning. It requires linguistic-minded learners. It was quite successful in private schools. It was largely dependent on teacher skills and it neglected the textbook. Vocabulary is emphasized over grammar, and no attention is paid to student feelings. This last point is a common point between the grammar translation method and the direct method. Now let's move to see the roles of the teacher in the direct method. The teacher introduces new words or phrases without using the learner's mother tongue. He directs the class's activities. He encourages students to practice and speak in the classroom. He encourages students to use self-correction. He uses oralia, demonstration, and visual aids to communicate words and ideas. And finally, he facilitates the learning process to the students.
In the direct method, the learners are active participants in the process of learning. They observe and practice and even self-correct. They also collaborate with each other and correct each other, but most importantly, they put in use their communication skill, meaning that the students engage in activities that are communicative, that involve conversations, that involve questions and answers orally. And since the purpose of the direct method is to teach authentic language and real life language, we can understand that the students' role in this method is very positive and is very engaging for students, and it's very beneficial for their learning. Classroom application. In the direct method, the language is taught in a way that involves both the teacher and the students. Both work together using authentic language in conversation practices and using questions and answers. Teachers encourage self-correction whenever possible by repeating the wrong answers and getting students to correct each other. Reading aloud is also practiced in the classroom. Students read aloud while the teacher uses realia and pictures to make meaning of the texts. Questions and answers are conducted in the target language. The students have the chance to ask questions and get answers. In conversation practice, the teacher is using a specific grammatical point to kickstart a conversation between him and the students. Later on, the students will use that grammatical structure themselves. Dictation is done in a process of reading, writing, and checking. Teacher reads a text for a few times and then dictate it. Later, another read is done and the students self-correct. Listening comprehension is done alongside with map drawing. Teacher gives the instructions and directions, and the students follow him by drawing maps. Writing is also practiced through writing paragraphs in relation to reading passages or relatable objects. Here we have an example that can be used in the direct method and in the modern method. A text that is relatable to the students and allows for a variety of activities like reading aloud and filling in the gaps, starting conversations, writing paragraphs, and doing communicative questions and answers. I really hope that you like this presentation. Thank you all for your attention and have a nice day.